How's it going, YouTube? Coach today with another video. And today, guys, what to bring to you is another Yu-Gi-Oh collaboration. I'm joined by a few guests here. If you want to introduce yourself.
I'm Yishan. Got a YouTube channel. Play some Yu-Gi-Oh every once in a while. Enjoy talking about the game. So I've ended up here once again. Thanks for having me, GG.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm Nivska. I'm streaming mostly on Twitch, Yu-Gi-Oh! Remote duels. I know a lot of people hate them, but I love having real cards in my hands. And yeah, thanks for having me as well. GG, by the way, no one of you will know me because I'm not in the international stage. I do my content in German. Yeah, this one, the loud, angry voice.
You know, it's one of those things, too, where even if you do content in German, it's still something where I feel like your content is really entertaining to watch, especially on Twitch. And that's another reason why I wanted you here today, because I want more people to be able to, see your content. And even Yishan, I really appreciate your discussion videos on certain topics. And it's really cool to be able to have both of you here today. And hopefully we can really go over some of the questions that I made for us today, because I feel like they're going to be really interesting to talk about. The first one that I have for us today is going to be talking about cards that should be at 3 or 0. So how do you feel about the concept, either of you, just without even talking about a specific card yet, talking about cards that just should be at 3 or 0?
Like the idea that is this a fair idea that some cards should either be it's only correct for them to be at 3 or 0? Is that the question?
Correct. It's kind of like how there's a banned section, a limited section, a semi-limited section, and then as my Discord calls, the Mally zone, and then unlimited. I feel like there's certain cards just objectively should be at a specific point on the ban list or off the ban list.
A lot of problems I see with these power cards limited is they are game winning on its own. Most of the time, let's take for example, I am playing Branded Despia and I got my Branded Fusion and I got my Cold Pie. I don't have to play around anything at all. This is practically at this point an I win button. I got my combo through at all. With this, which I think it's not very healthy. I prefer to have it at 3 or at 0. But the one-off power cards, these Seki things, I am not a big fan of, I gotta admit. Same with Red Reboot. I never see this card again at 3. This is a card, in my opinion, that has to be at 0 at this particular thing we can see. But I think only combo pieces or consistency cards for specific decks should be limited. Power cards should be at 0 from my point of view.
Yeah. I think definitely this idea actually does have some merit. There are a lot of cards I think that fall into this category, and there are probably a lot of cards that are like we just said, was that they're at 1 right now and maybe should be at 0. So I think I agree.
Yeah. Talking specifically about Red Reboot, Call by the Grave, there's a lot of people when we were talking about Maxx that even said, why not just bring it back to 1? And I think that's a horrible idea. But so there's a lot of 1-ofs in the game right now, especially talking about cards like Pankratops, and all these power 1-ofs. I don't really love the fact that they're at 1. I feel like they specifically should be at 3 or 0. Me personally, I feel like Reboot should be at 3 and Call by should be at 0. What are your takes on both of these cards?
Are you out of your mind with Red Reboot?
It's funny, yeah. I actually agree with this one. That is interesting. That is interesting. I think if anything, it'd be hard. It's possible you could want Called by at 3, but there's no. I mean, I don't really play that many trap decks, but I mean, the fact that Red Reboot is literally no counterplay these days.
Yeah,
you just draw Judgment, and the trap decks they just hope. There's really nothing you can do, and you don't even bother playing around it anymore. There's nothing I can do. What am I gonna do? Draw my Judgment? That's my counterplay.
Yeah, there was a lot of counter arguments that I was seeing in a couple of discussion groups that I was in, because we were talking about this question pretty big. And I feel like Red Reboot is one of those cards that is really toxic, but at the same point, it's there's so many outs for the combo decks too, that there's one singular card that can stop the trap decks from just going multiple floodgates on you. Because even at certain points, right, you have to rely on seeing one of your 3, maybe 4 if you side in a Duster as well. Because usually in a combo deck, you're deciding in 3 Twister, right? Or 3 Cosmic or whatever your back row option is. And then at that point, you're hoping that you see one, and then even if you do, and then you get hit with like a judgment, then like you auto lose to like a lot of the floodgates that are gonna be popped up against you. So I mean, like although Red Reboot is pretty toxic to be at a 3 of, I feel like it's fair to say that there should be a bigger out for a trap deck versus how many outs there are for a combo deck.
Yes and no. Most of the time, when I activated Red Reboot, I immediately won the game in this turn specifically. There is, when you play Eldritch, Dynamorphia, or what purple deck you might think you want to play, you get Red Reboot, you lose this turn most of the time. And this is a big problem, I think. When you get Floodgate, you don't lose immediately, you lose about in a couple turns, you know what I mean? Because Eldritch is not known for being a big OTK deck at this point. So I think, okay, Feather Duster, you get a Judgment. Okay, next turn you have another chance to draw into one of your back row destruction cards or whatever. So you have multiple chances in getting rid of the Floodgates, while Red Reboot wins you the game immediately when you resolve it.
That's fair. I always like playing devil's advocate because having the unpopular opinion is always gonna prompt better discussion too.
Yeah.
Now, here's one thing about Red Reboot that if you want to think about it, so it's exactly like Nivska was saying, was that there's a couple situations. Red Reboot's pretty much almost all. No, I wouldn't say almost always. A large percentage of the time is the best option. I have seen a couple, like it's not always the best card though. There's a lot of cases where it's not the best backer removal card. Where like the most common example is you draw like the second turn or the third turn of the game, and there's already a floodgate face up. Then this card feels like almost you'd rather just have Twin Twister or Harpies or anything besides this card because it doesn't do anything. And the other portion is where you somehow can't OTK. Which is rare. It is happening rarer and rarer these days, right? That used to be the total, like the balancing act behind this card, which is, well, if you can't OTK, they get their free trap, and it's going to be like a competitive game. Now, like, even if you can't OTK, you just Zeus everything away anyway. A lot of decks that can't OTK will just Zeus everything away and play this card. So there are some instances where it's not as good as Twin. But I think it's one of those cards that as the game keeps evolving, it's just harder and harder this card keeps getting better and better. It just keeps getting better because the power level keeps going up. The traps get better and this card gets better. If your deck gets better, this card still gets better against trap decks. So yeah, it's one of those cards that it's gonna keep getting better like Maxx, I think.
That is fair. I thought it was really funny. I was playing Striker one day and I bricked really bad. I didn't see Ray. And so I set Imperm, and I think it was like Imperm, and I had like there can be only one, and I like passed my opponent, and like the there can be only one like won me the game, and then in game 2 I got rebooted in Striker. I was like, why'd you set in reboot? And they're like, I didn't see any Striker cards, so I just assumed it was a background deck. And it was super funny because I was just like, summon Ray, and it was just over. But it was really funny. Red Reboot is a really interesting card. And again, just playing Devil's Advocate is always a really nice way to go about discussing these cards. Just because they are pretty insane. One card that I want to talk about, though, at 3 or 0 is Pankratops. And if you think it could come back to 3, or do you think that's actually fine at 1?
Yes, I was thinking about this, actually, when you had this slide. Pankratops, it's not as crazy as Red Reboot because there are some decks, like, if you play Pankratops against combo, it's the same as, like, maybe sometimes even worse than Forbidden Chalice, And then if you play against like some of those like rogue decks, they're like, hey, what the heck? This card is like so cracked against me. Like, you play against like the hero deck or whatever, some random deck. Like, if Pankratops is better against those like lower tier decks, which, I mean, I don't know if that's a reason to keep it at 1. I think it's probably fine to be at 3. Like, I don't even think like if blind second is a good strategy, then maybe the format's like that's okay. I don't think that's a bad thing. I see it is funny to see it at 1. I'll say, and some side decks don't even run a single copy. I think so. Maybe that's a good indication they could maybe be at 3 at this point.
Yeah. See, like I think it's gonna be really good in Spite format too because it's bigger than Toad and it's just an inherent summon.
Right. It's good. And is that such a bad thing? I don't know. It's like that might be that's a good thing to have at 3.
Yeah, I think At this point, I'm not sure. Most of the time, Pancratops is a +1 in card advantage against your opponent. You can battle over it, then chain it, destroy something. We all know it. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure because Pank out of nowhere, you get Panked is still, it feels so bad. I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe at 3 we have Beastmaster Alpha or what it's called. It has basically the same conditions and sees practically no play, like you said already. A Pank doesn't see any play whatsoever right now, so I think it's not easy, but I think at 3 it could be okay. But I don't want to be blamed of if it's some people say that's a shit idea.
Well, listen, another question is it the right thing to be at 1, or is it a 3 or 0 card? I think that's another because when it got limited, I was like, what the heck? And now I see why they did it. It actually makes a lot more sense to me now. But
Yeah.
I wonder if 1 is actually a good number, or maybe. I don't know. I honestly, it probably won't change the game that much no matter where they put this card. It'll just be annoying sometimes and feel really good other times. But
Yeah, it's a really strong card, but I don't know if putting it to 3 would be like the craziest thing. Like, I feel like it's another change of heart moment, right? But
Yeah,
Pank is
yeah.
still very good though in its own respect, so we'll have to see.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Moving on to our next topic, though, this is actually a really interesting one that I wanted to bring up because so I hear a lot of discussion in the OCG about how many people really dislike playing against Maxx. It's a card that is just really degenerate, really toxic, and it's something that everyone in the TCG is always debating, and the card goes to like $100 every single time a Banlist drops. But it's really interesting to talk about because as toxic as everyone views Maxx, it just never gets banned in the OCG. Do we feel like Mystic Mine is the TCG's version of Maxx?
I hope not.
Yeah. Oh god. This card forces us to main the one of Duster or Cosmic Cycling, and there are parallels to be seen seriously with Maxx and the Mystic Mine in the TCG and the OCG. Hands down.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy too because there's a lot of people who complain about Mystic Mine and how it's like really broken, which I'm not going to say that they're incorrect for that because the card is really insane. It's just one of those things where we've already seen it since Dane, I believe, Dark Neostorm, and it's just not been hit. Like as much as it's been complained about and as crazy as it's just not been hit. So it makes you wonder if they're just not hitting it the same way they don't hit Maxx in the OCG. And this is a point brought to me by someone in my Discord, 5 Point. Thanks for this question. It's really interesting to hear because it really is because, you know, every single time that we see Maxx, we're like, absolutely not. But we see Mystic Mine and there is a fair amount of people in the TCG that are still saying, you know, like the card's fine, you know, just like play the one of out or like post side, just realize that you have to have some kind of out for it. And it's I feel like it's definitely the most controversial card in the TCG at the moment.
Yeah, I think. Well, here's what I'll say. Maxx is a better card than Mystic Mine. I think pretty much that's pretty obvious, which is funny, but that's at 3 in the OCG and Mystic Mine. I think it got banned, right?
Yeah.
Best list or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, Maxx is better. But what's funny is that I don't know. The OCG has really dug their own grave on this one. They have balanced the entire game around Maxx, and if they ban it now, they're gonna have to go and like rebalance their whole entire game because they already balanced it around this card. Like it's so funny. Like if you look at the Drytron cards on the ban, there's like nothing. No one cares. You play whatever cards you want in Drytron. You know, or you play like any combo deck. Just play whatever you want. It's like we're not gonna ban any of it. You just get Maxx. It's fine. And so I think Maxx is for sure a better card. As to whether Mystic Mine gets banned here, I sort of like not cared too much whether or not it gets banned here. Like, I think it's a toxic card just like Maxx, but it's not nearly as good. There are a lot of decks that don't care too much about Mystic Mine. Even though sometimes they do. Although one thing is these decks that are like playing under Mystic Mine drive me bonkers. Like they can play under Mystic Mine and like it's pretty like incredible. Like you have to like link off your whole board and because you know they're gonna play under it. Like they don't have to deck you out anymore, so it's not like we're not playing this game. We're like, oh, do they have the main deck out? It's like, yeah, just give me a couple turns and then the game's over.
Like Prank Kids could perfectly play under Mystic Mine, or ABC, I think, is a deck as well that can completely work on it. I think something like this.
Yeah, even Drytron could play under this card.
Yeah,
until they're done. Yeah,
I'm playing Mystic Mine in Drytron.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, that is interesting, to say the least. But
Yeah.
It is a toxic card. It has nothing. Please ban it, Konami. I don't want to deal with this anymore.
It's definitely one of those cards too where you're talking about like being able to play under Mystic Mind that I think is really interesting because it's back like when FD was still like really big, because you could just like FD summon DPE and then you could just keep popping cards every single turn under like Mystic Mind until you're ready to pop your own Mystic Mind, which was pretty insane. So there's definitely a lot of advantage that you can gain under Mystic Mine. I just thought that it was a really cool thing to mention here. The fact that like, even though the card is so toxic, it makes you wonder about why it hasn't been hit yet. So it's definitely a little bit of a conundrum. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it keeps the meta in check.
It's a good question. I don't know. I honestly, maybe they will hit it, maybe they won't.
Yeah,
I'm hoping it gets banned.
They won't hit it. They won't.
So off of the Mystic Mine, because I know it's a pretty big topic for a lot of people. Let's go into something that a lot of us are very familiar with, and this is going to help out a lot of the newer players. So I've been getting this question quite a bit, and it's talking more so about Yu-Gi-Oh slang. So I'm going to say a couple words here, and then when I say the word, give me what it means to be able to like perform that action. So if I say to spin a card, what does that mean?
That's where you take a card and you spin it on your mat really quickly. Just to flex on your opponent. No, I think it means go back to deck. That's at least how I always interpreted that one.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Nightmare Unicorn spins a card.
Yeah, so spinning always usually just means back to deck. But what does bounce mean?
When a card gets back into your hand, like
hand.
Compulse. Bounces the card back to your hand.
Yeah, so the difference between spin and bounce for everyone who's newer, bouncing is to hand usually and spinning is to deck. Now, if I were to say, and I know this seems a bit easy to us, but if I were to say a Stratos, so if I like normal summoned a monster that wasn't Stratos, and then I said Stratos effect, what would that mean?
It is when it searches on normal summoning a card from your archetype, like the new Scareclaw card here, right card, is the Stratos from this archetype, where you normal summon, you get something from your in-archetype cards to your hand.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think Stratos was maybe is it because it was the first? Because it does a lot of them don't work on special summon, only work on normal summon. But I think it usually just means when it's summoned, you search. And I don't think it's like has to be a strict one-to-one, like, oh, if this card is special summon and it doesn't search, we can't call it a Stratos. I think you could still call it a Stratos, even if it only works on normal summon. But yeah.
Yeah, it's some form of adding.
Some form of adding.
Then we have Lone Fire. What does that mean?
This one I don't see as much, actually. I mean, I assume this means special from deck.
Yeah.
But I don't see this one as much as I used to.
I never heard this term.
It's come up a few times. Besides the actual Lone Fire, if you ever hear this one, it essentially just means summon from deck. If someone just goes like, "Oh, effect," and you go, "What does it do?" and they go, "It's a Lone Fire." It's summoning from deck. So then, of course, popping. If you like have a card that destroys something and you point to it on the board, pop.
Exactly.
E-Telly. This one was pretty straightforward with the Lone Fire, except Lone Fire is like a monster typically that like summons from the deck. E-Telly is usually some form of a quick play spell that can just summon from deck as well.
Quick launch.
Yeah,
you might want to refer to as E-Telly a couple times.
And for whatever reason, Splight has one.
Yeah,
it's pretty good. And then lastly, what does Book of Moon mean? If someone points to you and they go book,
it sets it face down.
Yeah,
exactly.
In defense position, preferably.
Awesome. Yeah, I know for us it seems like really simple, really easy to do, but like there's a lot of new players out there who don't know these terminologies, so I would imagine this would be helpful.
new player tip. I don't care what your opponent says. You read the card anyway, because all these new cards
Correct.
do way more than what they say. You know, like Striker Dragon. Oh, it Stratoses me for a quick boot sector. Oh, really? Is that all? No, you better read that thing. It's got like 4 million effects. So
Yeah,
read
exactly.
the cards. Don't listen to what your opponent says.
Yeah, if you don't read Tenki and then you don't know it makes him gain 100,
Exactly.
you know,
Exactly.
it's a big deal. So this next one that I have for you too, it's actually one that I feel very strongly about, and I really want this changed. But it's
Mhm.
what ruling would you like changed in the game? And for me, it's hand verification. I really want Lullaby Mind Crush back in the game, but right now they're almost unplayable. If there was one ruling you could change, what would it be?
I hate and I love and by love I hate every aspect about missing timing. Missing timing is the shittiest mechanic in the whole game. Try to explain a new player the difference between if and when.
When?
That's such a idiotic rule at this point. For example, I was one of the people I bought the whole Yang Xing core because I thought the card looks cool, and then I realized, why is it not activating on Edo Pro? I don't know. And then I learned it the hard way. There is something like called missing timing, and it's such an idiotic mechanic. I hate it so much. I hate missing timing. I hate everything about it.
See, I always hoped that they did like the Exorcister treatment to Yang Xing because like all the cards in Exorcister were terrible. Like they all required your opponent to mess with their graveyard. But now they have a card that just says whenever a card is moved, and that's how it should have been from the start. So I really hope that they print new Yang Xings and they make them ifs, and that would be insane. So I definitely understand that.
Yeah, that's a good point. That those rules are just it is just a terrible rule to have, and it's unnecessarily confusing for new players. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Um, I was trying to think. There are a couple that I think are just terrible. These are almost more they need to there's a couple there's a policy that needs to be fixed. The decklist policy is horrendous. It is so bad if the policy like contradicts itself in like 5 places in the policy itself. You know, because I was trying to like I was under someone got like disqualified for something, and I was trying to like figure out what the right thing to do was as a judge, and I couldn't like there's like 5 interpretations, and you just have to read like what some of the policies says the deck list cannot be modified no matter what. You read the next deck list policy, it says the deck list can be modified if this occurs. It's like they just there's no good. It needs a whole revamp on what's acceptable and what's not. Especially maybe they should take this chance to integrate like online registration with deck list policy there and have it all like much better. I think that would help players. The second thing is at the end of a phase or a step, there is a rule that, like, so let's say hey, I say, GG, we're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I said, you know what? I'm in the main phase. I have nothing to do. I'm gonna pass priority to you, and GG, you're like, you know what? I got nothing as well. I'll pass priority back to you. Let's go to the battle phase. You're like, no, no, no. I don't want to go to the battle phase yet. Actually, I want to stay in main phase. And you're like, what? And then you say, and you know what? Actually, I passed priority. You can do this forever. You actually don't ever have to leave the phase. The only thing that stops you is some sort of slow play penalty. I don't think it matters that much for the sense of Yu-Gi-Oh! But if you look at the chart online, there's like you can't be forced to leave the phase ever unless by a slow play penalty. So I don't understand why that's part of the game. It makes no sense. If you ever ask a head judge to explain why this is in the game, I'm pretty sure it's just to like prevent new players because like you could do some tricks like you enter the main phase and you're like, hey, your opponent's like, hey, do you have anything in main phase? And they're like, no. Okay, it's battle phase now then because you passed priority to me. Like, I guess that's maybe the only reason why that's there, but it's a silly rule. I think it can create a lot of time stalls as well, and we don't need any more of those. So
I never heard
yeah.
about this ruling.
Yeah, well, it's because it never comes up because no one. I mean, most people aren't that scummy. But if you look at the chart, you don't have to leave the phase ever. I mean, it says both players have. You have to pass priority, and then after both players pass priority, you still have to agree. I don't understand why that's there, and it just bothers me from a ruling standpoint.
No, that's pretty wild. going forward off of that, so we do have a lot of rulings that we have to be familiar with, especially for the biggest tournament of the year, and that's going to be Nationals, which is coming up next weekend. When it comes to Nationals, what do we think is going to be the deck that wins?
Whatever I'm playing, so that's pretty easy for me. Just kidding.
My deck, best
So-
deck every time.
Here in Germany, we just had our German nets. And here won Pantherian, and we had decks like Despia as well in the top card. So I think it's a race between Pantherian, Despia, Sword Soul, and maybe Flunder, but I'm not sure about Flunder. But I think at least these three decks, one of these three will come out of top, I think.
What will win? Probably something with right in the deck. I have to imagine. Its card is like very consistent, especially like when you're going through top 64. I think there's gonna be so many Rite of Aramashir decks. You know, Emergency Teleport is probably one of the best cards in the game. Like, you're just playing the best possible cards you could play if you have Emergency Teleport and Rite in your deck.
So you're saying just some sort of
Probably some sort of punk
Brave-
synchro. Yeah, something like
Yeah.
that.
something like this flavored. Yeah, sure. Maybe it's ABC. Then what do we have? Maybe we have Sun Avalon.
I will say, if
Brave, or
ABC wins,
something.
I won't count me as being right. Okay, if ABC wins, doesn't matter if they play Punk and Brave in their deck. I will happily be wrong on that one if ABC wins.
See, I think those two decks have a really good shot at winning, and I believe that one of these two decks will win. It's either going to be Despia or it's going to be Dragon. And I think both have their own respects to win. I think that Despia is one of those decks that a lot of people are just like being less prepared for now, because a lot of people are looking toward like the Punk Theory and Punk Synchro, Sword Soul, and those decks that have been a lot more prevalent lately, because Despia's kind of fallen off. But I think that's where Despia is really going to shine. And then we were just talking about what deck can play the best cards. You have Dragon that can play things like Right, Snow. It can play a ton of hand traps, including Gamma. There's just so many opportunities to even sideboard cards like Eradicator. So, like, I really like Dragon a lot right now, and I think it has a lot of potential.
The Dragon deck is good, and it has Emergency Teleport in the form of Quick Launch, as we were discussing.
True.
It won the French Nationals, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if I'm correct. Yeah, I mean Dragons is not a deck to mess with. It's really strong right now. I underestimated it my own on the Nationals, and I got kicked out by Dragons. So yeah, the deck is pretty good. The deck is pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Despia, this is one thing I cannot believe more people are not playing Brave Despia. That I played against that a couple times online against some pretty good players, and I'm like, why do people not play the Brave Despia? Like, I know the Allures, lots of patchwork version is the most popular, but I mean, oh my god, like it is the biggest. Like when I play against Despia, I'm gonna be honest. Here, if I go second, I got my Veilers and my Ashes, and it's okay. All right, if it's Aluber, it's getting Veiler Imperved. If it's Brand of Fusion, it's getting Ash. Do whatever you want, and like that works. I think that's probably the right call 90% of the time. But like the Brave engine, just with Brain Fusion, is so good.
The problem is a bit, because this is something we got here in Germany as well, and this is why it doesn't see any play here. What do you do when you just open Right and Aluber? Which route do you go?
That's the roughest part. But we still have 3 branded opening, and they play like 6. They play like 3 of the pot card as well. It bricks more, definitely, but I don't know. I played against it a couple times, and I'm like, oh my god, it is so strong.
It has a higher ceiling. It has a higher ceiling, indeed. The problem is, but you can build houses with this deck as well. So I'm not a big fan of the Brave variant. I think Branded Despia is the best one. And now, by the way, please start playing Albalenatus. We have so much Dragon in the format.
Yeah, I think that the Brave variant is really good though because of one singular card, and that's Crossout. So Crossout is a card that is really strong in the format where there's a very big commonality, and we were just talking about how Rite of Armigir is like the best card right now. If you can play Brave Despia and play cards like Crossout to be able to negate cards like Right, I think that you're already putting yourself at a really steep advantage because you already want to be able to negate things like Ash because that's a really big problem for you in the deck. But Crossout on Right is always and will always be the craziest thing that you can negate this format, I believe.
Yeah, it's a good. I mean, it gives you value for sure. And
Yeah.
a lot of the Despia decks are already playing Crossout because they're so scared of Ash.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. Um, I agree though. It's definitely more bricky, which is the pain. Like they always like in the OCG it was pretty much all Brave Despia, right? Like from what I remember it was like mostly Brave Despia, and here it's way less popular.
Yeah,
And
the most people here prefer the branded Despia version.
yeah, yeah.
Well, any closing thoughts for today, everyone?
I wish you the best of luck in the NA WCQ. I have no idea what we win because we just saw the German nationals and it was basically a mix of everything in top card. Like I think Auto guys, and we had it added Gnist as well, by the way.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It should be a lot of fun. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Those events are kind of fun. It's top 64, right? So that's usually better than top 30. Well, it's always better than top 32 for topping purposes.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
Yeah, Nats
it
is
should
gonna be
be
a
a lot
fun
of
time. I'm excited for all the side events after, you know, the day 0, I guess, for like Friday doing side events, and then like the main event. And then just meeting even like Jaden and Aster is gonna be really cool too, and like meeting a lot more people, and it's gonna be a great time. I'm very excited for this weekend. Well, thank you both for being on the channel today. It's been a lot of fun. I always love doing collaborations like this to really be able to discuss some of these bigger topics in the game, especially like the 3-0 thing. I think that's always gonna be like a big question, and it's just really fun to hear other people's perspectives.
Yeah, of course, anytime.
Sure, thanks for having me here, and I want to apologize if I have some bad pronunciations in English because not first language.
It's
all
fantastic.
good. Yeah, you did great today. So it's you know, it's always cool too, because even like I was saying earlier, if people don't always know a lot of people I would deem as friends on Twitch or YouTube, I always like being able to show off their channels on mine and really be able to showcase them. So I'm glad you were able to be here today.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely. Well, everyone have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thanks.
Bye.